What a week it's been. A roller coaster ride, to say the least, around Steeler Nation as the Pittsburgh Steelers go from, and this really was actually in a day, go from the lowest of lows, losing the one player they couldn't lose, losing their starting quarterback, the future Hall of Famer in Ben Roethlisberger for the season. That news breaks. And then we go to bed, basically. We close our night and then hear the news that the Pittsburgh Steelers add. And they're still in win-now mode, and they trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, formerly now of the Miami Dolphins, a number one pick, a first-round pick, number 11th overall, but a first-round pick, number one for the Dolphins, just a couple years ago, now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Mason Rudolph, now the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now that you're caught up, it's time to kind of unpack and discuss this all. This is another Steelers Live chat edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I've done show after show after show since the regular season got underway. Training camp, preseason, regular season got underway here for SteelersNow.com. But it's been a while since I've done a Steelers Live chat. And as much as I love dropping my hot takes, and this still, and what I do here, obviously, for Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now, is going to be a lot about my analysis and my opinions and my thoughts on the matter, but you're welcome to provide yours as well, as we've had success with these before, so I wanted to bring those back. I did promise the return of the Steelers Live chat. Thought about it last week, but then technical difficulties ruined it, but here we are yet again. Some personal things in my life also prevented this from happening last week, but here we are yet again, and I'm going to make some sense of the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, because I think this is key here. The second that news broke, knowing what we knew earlier in the day with Ben missing the entire year with the elbow surgery, and then soon after announcing he's going to finish out his contract and wants to play next year, and Mason Rudolph's now going to be the starting quarterback, and many are high on Mason Rudolph, myself included, but we also went through the roller coaster ride of after the game. I was sitting there in the press box and the debate amongst media, and then we saw what the fans were talking about on Twitter, as Twitter was running amok, with the fact that Ben left the game, Rudolph finished the game, finished in the second half. I was sitting there. Rudolph carried himself very, very well, was very composed, was very confident in his podium session, didn't even talk in the locker room, took the podium. Ben didn't talk. That was Rudolph's moment, even though they didn't win that game. And it appeared a little bit like maybe a new era was molding, even though we didn't know then that Ben was going to miss the rest of the season. We didn't know that, but there already were people saying that Rudolph should start next week, and I was banging on the drum, as well as some others that I think are logical, that if Ben is healthy, he's obviously not going to be benched. Ben, yes, needs to be more efficient than where he was last year, and I thought he would be, but he still threw the most yards of his career last season. He's still playing all right, and it's just not going to happen off of one half of football when they didn't even win. You needed more. You needed weeks upon weeks of Ben playing poorly and them losing to even consider it, despite Rudolph really impressing in the offseason. But we went through all of that, and then the news came out, Ben's going to miss the year, so that debate is dead. Kind of makes me happy to avoid that conversation, at least now until next year when Ben maybe wants to pull a Brett Favre, come back, and they already have the heir apparent and doing well if they would make the playoffs with Rudolph. But regardless, you figure that, okay, Rudolph, you might have confidence in him. He might play well. Maybe even they can squeak into the playoffs, because as I've detailed in past shows, which can be found here through the channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Click subscribe there. Yeah, I got a little ahead of it there on the graphic. Is the fact that Rudolph is still a rookie. He's going to have growing pains. He's not going to be perfect. He talked about how they didn't want to change. They weren't going to change the offense that much for him, which is good. I think that's a good sign. It gave him an advantage over Dobbs for me. But you're going to go through those normal growing pains. And despite the landscape being opened, and there's still talent on this team, and they played two contenders right away despite not looking great, so maybe things could be turned around. You also figure that, okay, maybe this isn't going to be a championship season even if they squeak into the playoffs. You're not most likely going to go to the AFC title game or the Super Bowl with your backup quarterback. It seemed like with Ben being out, that would not happen. Even if you believe in the future of Rudolph, you got to go through some growing pains. Unless this is Tom Brady taking over for Bledsoe, it's unlikely that's the case. So you got to go through some growing pains. And then you wonder, well, if that's the case, why would you trade a first-round pick, which you need for your future, for the rest of your positions, because you might not worry about a quarterback anymore for the future, but for the rest of the team, whether you're building around Rudolph or Ben, why wouldn't you want to stockpile that first-round pick knowing that this year's not a championship season? Well, guys, I got to tell you, that's what I first initially thought. I thought it was perplexing, okay? Why would you bring in Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was a stud with the Miami Dolphins? There's a picture of him soaking up the Miami sun, and he looked happy there, but wasn't really happy. I mean, I could do a whole nother show on how him and many others are really dictating their own future like NBA players, where Jalen Ramsey doing this now with the Jaguars. I'm not happy. I want gone. I want traded. I want to win. I want more money. Le'Veon Bell, whatever. They're getting their way, really. Even Antonio Brown eventually getting their way on what they want, like NBA players. Minkah Fitzpatrick wanted out, got out in relatively quick fashion, and they give up they lose a number one draft pick for them. They lose a number 11 overall pick, their first-round pick just in 2018. So they would want to get that back. It makes sense. The Dolphins want to get a first-round pick back. If the Steelers miss the playoffs, it could be better than what they had before. But at least they want to get a first-round pick back for a first-round player to what they drafted. So it makes sense for the Dolphins, a team that wasn't going to win this year. But if the Steelers aren't going to win a championship too, you thought, okay, why not keep it? Well, let me put it to you this way. Minkah Fitzpatrick, trading for him and giving up that first-round pick for next year, basically means Minkah Fitzpatrick is your first-round pick next season, and you get to already play him for a full year, so you get to already learn about him and have him get that maturation process rolling. He's a little bit older of a player than what would just be a quintessential rookie, since he also played for the Dolphins. He's 22 years old, played very high level on multiple-time national championship teams, two-time national champion at Alabama under Nick Saban, one of the greatest college coaches of all time, no matter what you think of him, and even has NFL coaching experience, despite obviously not successful when Saban was in Miami. So there's a lot to love about Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's why the Dolphins drafted him when they did. But they got it back to kind of retool again because they need to rebuild, and that basically becomes your number one overall pick or your number one pick next year, your first-round pick for the Steelers next year is now Minkah Fitzpatrick, who you trade and get to play this season. And it also shows an immense amount of confidence in Mason Rudolph, who looked good in camp, looked good in the preseason, looked good in that half of football in week 2 at home against the Seahawks. I was there to see it. Doesn't guarantee anything, and obviously if Ben's healthy, you keep Ben. He's not healthy, though. This is the Rudolph show for at least this season, and that kind of makes some sense of bringing in Fitzpatrick because they could still win this year. They do believe in Rudolph, and it doesn't matter if you don't. You have him for several more seasons. He has a 3-year deal. You're not just going to only get him for this year. If that was the case, then it would be a bad move. And he then becomes your first-round pick next season, which is a pretty damn good first-round pick in a position the Steelers absolutely can't draft and suck at drafting and are horrendous in trying to draft the secondary for year after year. So Kevin Colbert ends up getting aggressive and bringing in Minkah Fitzpatrick to be that guy. So it's like a draft pick for them. I see some of you guys already in the the chat here, and yeah, Michael Laney, I do think it was worth it because again, it's not just for one season, and even if the season goes completely in the tubes without Ben, and even though I believe in Mason Rudolph for the future, wouldn't shock me. I mean, this is a rookie quarterback who we've not seen in more than a half of football in the regular season. But say they don't make the playoffs again. It won't be the thud of disappointment like it was last year with all the talent and the fact that they squandered those games, got upset time and time again, and that's why they missed with all the drama. Now you figure at least the drama is behind them. And not only that, they now have the excuse with Ben not being there. So if Ben misses the year and you don't get a Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady effect, or even Aaron Rodgers after Brett Favre, then okay, we're waiting a year for that. Steve Young after Montana. We're waiting a year for that, but most teams wouldn't make the playoffs losing their starting quarterback either. So the world's not coming to an end, at least provides an excuse there. And then you have Minkah Fitzpatrick the next couple years as well, who's now, he seems everything he's saying that he likes being with the Steelers. I mean, here's what Kevin Colbert said. He's an impact player. You can watch that, SteelersNow.com, as well as Pittsburgh Sports Live throughout the channel in the Steelers Now section. But Kevin Colbert, he's an impact player. They're saying the same things the Dolphins said 2 years ago when they drafted him. But again, it becomes basically the Steelers' first-round pick next year is Minkah Fitzpatrick, a player they also get to play this year. So it's not 1 year of control. It's more than that. It doesn't matter even if this year's not a winning season. It still could be a good move. That still makes sense for me, even though initially I was right with you and was kind of confused because you lost your starting quarterback. Although one interesting thing as I go through the chat here to answer anything else you guys got for me, Jared Devil, great pickup if Ben comes back full force. They also have a bunch of faith in Rudolph. So either way, yeah, and that's going to be a controversy though. Regardless of who is the starter next year, regardless of what happens this year, it doesn't matter for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick is still going to be a Steeler, is still going to be playing well, and that move still makes sense because it's still necessary either way. Because the one thing that I didn't think would happen, and I'm not always a glass half full guy, I try to keep it real with you, but I was keeping it real prior to the season, and I was honestly believing this, that the Steelers' defense would be better. You bring in Steven Nelson as a free agent, something that they normally don't do, but that would help the secondary. That would maybe create some turnovers, help get some interceptions that weren't there the last couple years. Draft Justin Lane. Thought that was a nice draft pick for when they got him. Artie Burns even seemed like he was playing a little bit better and improving a little bit throughout training camp in the preseason. Obviously, this isn't the secondary, but Devin Bush, you trade up to get him. That's aggressive again from Kevin Colbert, kind of un-Kevin Colbert-like through his tenure in Pittsburgh. That's going to replace Ryan Shazier, which has been a weakness since his injury a year and a half ago. TJ Watt is still a stud. Tuitt has been playing better and played well in Week 2 against the Seahawks. Bud Dupree, you figure he might step up and add more sacks and pass rush with Devin Bush. Joe Hayden got that contract at the end of the offseason. Feel like he has something left in the tank, even if it's for one more year, 2, 3. We don't know how much gas is left in that tank, but you feel like if he stays healthy, you get something left in that tank if you kind of can load management him. Well, none of that's happened so far this year. The defense has looked anemic, especially against the Patriots, who, of course, are Tom Brady and the Patriots. They're going to make everybody look bad, but still, that's your competition for trying to win that championship. And they didn't even look that great against Seattle, with the exception of TJ Watt. Devin Bush has had to go through his growing pains. He's not looked great, although I still believe in him, and I'm sure many do. And I did predict him to be Defensive Rookie of the Year, as many did as well. And right now, that's not looking good, but certainly could still turn around. The last defensive player they traded up to get in the draft, Troy Polamalu, he also had a sluggish start to his career. He didn't play well his rookie season either, so we'll see. But Devin Bush is certainly not dominated on the scene the first 2 weeks. Joe Hayden got hurt. He's not been healthy. We've seen nothing really otherwise from any type of rookies on the defense. Tuitt has stepped up a little. But that defense has not been – you think the defense would be better, but it almost has looked the same despite new additions. So they need even newer additions and even more help to it, and that's Minkah Fitzpatrick again. And that guy is an impact player, as Kevin Colbert said. That guy's a stud who can by himself take over games. He is that first-round value. He can create those turnovers. He can create those tackles. He can stop plays before they get too out of control. And the secondary needs help regardless of who's at quarterback. So regardless of who's at quarterback next year, and by the way, again, if Mason Rudolph plays well and guides him to the playoffs or really even plays well in general, it'll be hard to not start him next year. It honestly will. Despite, as I said earlier, you're not going to bench Ben when he's healthy, but now you're going to see an entire year of Mason Rudolph. You wouldn't have benched Ben if he played this year in any of these games, unless it was several weeks in a row of playing poorly and the season was really out of control. But if you get an entire year where Mason Rudolph's playing adequately, if not better than that, especially if they make the playoffs, then it'll be hard not to move on from Ben. And Ben, if he wants to play, if he wants to honor the contract, whatever, maybe he won't want to go somewhere else. Maybe he would. That was rumors a couple years ago. That could be a whole Brett Favre scenario all over again. But that'll be a drama, and we'll discuss it then. But either way, you need Minkah Fitzpatrick, and he can certainly help you because that still fills a position of need, and you have more control of it than just this season. If it was just this year, I'd be with you. But beyond that, that's how you can make sense of that move. Even though it was odd, and I admittedly thought it was weird and didn't really love it the second it happened because of the Ben news. Fitz being under rookie contract with a fifth-year option makes it well worth it. Exactly. I mean, this is a guy who, that's what I didn't even bring up yet. Not only are you going to have control of him beyond this year, and you have several more years of a first-round pick, basically. The Dolphins drafted him 11th overall in 2018, and it becomes your first-round pick for next year for the Steelers. But more importantly, he's on a rookie contract. So you don't have to pay him much. I mean, pay him more than you and I make, but he's not getting the millions upon millions of the mega deal that we know so much about thanks to Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. That's not happening for Minkah Fitzpatrick. This is how the Seattle Seahawks won a championship a few years ago and went to 2 Super Bowls and had that Russell Wilson era and what should have been 2 rings despite Marshawn Lynch, not calling his number going a goal line against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But that Seahawks era, that Legion of Boom, when Richard Sherman was there, Earl Thomas was there, and we see Earl Thomas leave with his middle finger out because he wanted more money. Those players, including Russell Wilson, who later got a mega deal, were all on rookie deals. So that's how they were able to have so many stars on that roster and dominate for 2 or 3 years, because they had all those guys on rookie deals. It's an issue for Dallas right now. Now, unlike Seattle, they didn't get a Super Bowl championship out of it. They didn't get 2 Super Bowl appearances out of it. They didn't get any. But they now are worrying about who they're going to pay between Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, and both are necessary for that team. And they brought in Amari Cooper, but there's eventually going to be issues with paying all these guys. And maybe they could, but there is a salary cap, despite what Jerry Jones wants to do. So that's an issue because they had those guys on rookie deals for a while. They didn't cash in. The Seahawks did cash in. We'll see what the Steelers do, but when they're on rookie deals, it makes it easier for you to build a team and a better team, and it gives you a window. And that's now the window with Minkah Fitzpatrick because, yes, he is on a rookie deal. 8 first-round picks on defense now. Michael Laney. Yeah, I mean, again, you're going to expect a lot with that being the case, though. If you look back through history, if you look at even players who weren't originally drafted by the Steelers, Fitzpatrick, Steven Nelson, overall, yeah, you got a bunch. I didn't fully count it. I'm going to just take your word for it. But there's a decent amount of former first-round picks on the Steelers defense right now. And this is Steelers defense that 2 years ago, the defense is why that team didn't beat Jacksonville in the playoffs. They let Blake Bortles go up and down the field on them. Okay? The offense scored points. All the drama that was going on last year, the offense scored points. He had 2 receivers with over 1,000-yard receiving. And even with Mason Rudolph, who's going to throw through the rookie growing pains, I do like him. There is confidence there. I don't think it'll be horrendous. He'll get his numbers. They will play well with him. And that offense struggling through weeks 1 and 2 with Ben, I would have said the same thing if Ben was the starter, but I think that's going to come around. And I did think the offense wouldn't take this drastic hit without AB if Juju could get a number 2 to play with him, if he could step up. Juju hasn't been great those 2 weeks. There needs to be a number 2 receiver. Look on past shows for this. You can subscribe while you're there, but look on past shows for this. Pittsburgh Sports Live. It's all through the mic drop section in terms of who's going to be that number 2 receiver. And months ago, I said it had to be James Washington. Moncrief wouldn't be the guy. He's dropped every pass thrown, it appears like. It's amazing he's still there. Eli Rogers shows back up at the facility. Switzer's not been doing anything for you, losing his opportunity as a returner, which is really what he mainly gives you. And they need a number 2. To help Juju stop the double team. Carr needs to be healthy, needs to be better. They need better protection from the O-line. The offense, and of course the tight ends being a question. But Vance McDonald looked really good with Rudolph. Maybe Rudolph being there will get everybody else to step up. Maybe it'll motivate everybody else. He has the chemistry with James Washington. He has the chemistry with Vance McDonald. We saw McDonald in the second half of the Seattle game, and we saw him and James Washington not through college at Oklahoma State, but also with the Steelers this preseason in touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. Tons of chemistry there. They know each other well. They're really good friends going back to Oklahoma State. So that might help solidify the number 2 receiver spot, which in turn helps Juju, which in turn helps the entire offense be more balanced, which in turn helps Rudolph, which in turn helps the team and fixes the offensive problems. So while I initially thought it would be fixed anyway with Ben, just because that talent will eventually get fixed, Rudolph being there instead of Ben may fix it quicker because he'll develop that chemistry with James Washington and he'll become the number 2 right away. Very possible. How did he do first practice? Well, that's a great question. That's a great question here. SteelersNow.com has that coverage for you, SteelersNow.com. We also have the sights and sounds of Minkah Fitzpatrick's first practice throughout the channel on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So just scroll through the Steelers Now section. Although one of the recent videos, so you go to Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube, you'll see it. But we have that on SteelersNow.com, and what I will tell you that is there, he looked really, really good. He looked like he's an intelligent football player. There's a high football IQ there. He looked like he was fitting in. You already see him talking with teammates and coaches and knowing the schemes. And it did not appear he was confused at all. He was saying all the right things in terms of he's excited to be a Steeler. He talked about the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And while none of that really matters now, and a lot of players who are great players didn't know the history of the Steelers and still play really, really well, or whatever team they're on. But the fact that he does know the history, the fact that he really wants to be there and he's hungry because he wanted the hell out of Miami while they were tanking, all those players went out. And the fact that he really wanted to be with a team in a franchise like Pittsburgh. He called it a program like it's college, but he came from Alabama, star-studded national championship-like program with a Hall of Fame coach. Now playing for the Steelers, a star-studded championship-level history-ridden program with, like it or not, a Hall of Fame coach. So that defense needs to improve. So does the offense. But Rudolph now being the starter and Minkah Fitzpatrick being there, certainly mightily, I believe, going to help both ends. And that's not a knock on Ben at all. He would have stayed the starter if he was healthy. But it could indirectly help everybody else in terms of James Washington stepping up. And Minkah Fitzpatrick just adds to your team. I mean, he is a stud. He is an impact player. If you don't believe me, listen to Kevin Colbert. Okay, an impact player. So he looked real good in his first practice, whatever that's worth to you. Moncrief needs to be benched or he needs to glue on his gloves. Yeah, I mean, again, and this is what's funny. It wasn't the point of this show, but why not discuss it? Because, well, brush my shoulders off. I was right, and many of you were wrong. Moncrief is not going to be the Steelers' number 2. Moncrief might not be on this team by the time you watch this and by the time I'm done with this live chat, with this recording. He was brought in, and that was a solid addition, especially after you lose AB. Okay, he had a lineage of time with Jacksonville and Indianapolis, and yes, his time with Indy did not include Andrew Luck. Before he retired, he had that year off, and that was when Moncrief was there. Moncrief then with the Jag didn't have a legit quarterback either. That was Blake Bortles, and he was mostly injured through his time in the league. And you look at the numbers, you look at the combine stats, you're seeing a burner. You're seeing a guy who's a speedster, who can run, who can do every single route, who's faster than everybody else on the field. So there's reason to like him. And many of you fans did. But that's not enough of a reason, as I try to make some sense of your previous argument, where all of you were so elated going into the season about Moncrief to the point that you were arguing he's going to be the number 2. He might not even be just the number 2, but a Pro Bowler, many of you were saying. A colleague and friend of mine, Neil Coulong, who edits for the NFL's Wire with USA Today, and certainly that includes the Steelers Wire with USA Today. And I used to have him on my Trib show a lot. Maybe we'll do some work here with Pittsburgh Sports Live. But we go back and forth, whether it be – people may think we're hating on each other on Twitter because we kind of get really brash with each other and arrogant. But it's making fun of you guys, and the text in between the two of us personally show how we really feel. But him and I we disagree a lot, and we were on par with this in terms of we were making bets with people. I actually got to go back and look and see if there's any bets I can cash in on. Because we had some people out there who were betting with us that Moncrief would get 1,000 yards, would be a Pro Bowler, would have 10 touchdowns. Just astronomical numbers that made no damn sense, that he never did before, even when healthy. And I always bought into James Washington in terms of James Washington being that number 2. And I buy in even more now. So this is topical today because it's about and why because of Mason Rudolph. Okay? James Washington and Mason Rudolph have the chemistry. They have the connection from Oklahoma State. James Washington, I don't know where I'm making up names now, but James Washington and Mason Rudolph have tons of chemistry and connection from Oklahoma State. James Washington was better than Moncrief. He beat out Moncrief for me in training camp in the preseason as the better receiver, especially with Rudolph throughout the preseason, touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. For whatever reason, and I thought it wouldn't happen, I thought James Washington would get the first opportunity to be number 2. I thought Tomlin would give him credence because Ben had loved him so much and talked him up last year, and he played well at times, even though there was the subtle jabs of dropping some balls, but he was seemingly the guy, the incumbent there. I thought Tomlin would go to him first as an option ahead of Moncrief. It didn't happen. They went to Moncrief first as their first option to at least try being the number 2. So you guys were right there that they would go to Moncrief first, even though he was the guy they brought in. Thought it would be James Washington. But it turns out at the end of the day, I'm correct. In terms of James Washington is the guy that needs to be the number 2 that will step up there. And you'll see even more of that with Mason Rudolph. The chemistry they have, I almost guarantee a touchdown this Sunday against the Niners in Cali because of that chemistry, because that connection from college. He's going to want to rely on him if nothing else, if plays drop dead. He's going to go to James, and they know where each other are in the field and where the ball will be. There's no learning that needs to happen there. So James Washington has even a better chance now with Mason Rudolph than with Ben to be that number 2. But just everything pointed to him being the number 2, and I didn't get why everyone was so high on Moncrief. But yeah, Moncrief, he's not going to be the number 2 in any way. And I agree 100%. I don't know what that was either on Moncrief or whether that was on Rudolph or whether that was on Minkah Fitzpatrick, but I appreciate it. Okay. Deontay Johnson, he needs to get more reps. I'm with you there. Certainly not the number 2 receiver. I mean, he was a solid draft pick. It made sense drafting him, but you have depth despite a lot of guys needing to step up. I mean, Switzer hasn't been getting it done. He loses his punt return opportunity against Seattle, so it'll remain to be seen what he does in the future because while he could also be a slot receiver, that was his bread and butter. That's where he had success his whole career, going back to Dallas and college as a returner. And he talked about a lot this offseason at camp. I talked to him a lot because of the West Virginia connection on how he wanted to get a return for a touchdown. He had that at every level of his career, his football life, and didn't happen last year. He was brought in half season, didn't get the continuity with Ben, all of that. So you thought, and I talk about him a lot because I do work for some West Virginia outlets, and obviously him being from there. So they're covering him heavily, and a lot of it was about him, but it might not be much more because we don't know his future based on what we've seen so far through a couple weeks. So much so Eli Rogers is now back in the fold, so we'll see if he takes his spot. The two of them are very similar players. You don't need both. But say James Washington steps up as the number 2 and Moncrief stays, he could still be a solid guy to have, maybe finally catch a pass or two. Juju will step up. Juju actually getting over Randy Moss in terms of the fastest guy and the youngest guy to get 2,500 career receiving yards, 900 plus his rookie year, and then 1,000 plus last year, arguably even a better year than AB. He's a stud. He's an elite receiver. He's going to be a Pro Bowler again. That'll all turn around. It'll just be harder for him without a number 2 receiver, and he'll face all the double coverage. But that'll turn around. So there's depth there. And then Vince McDonald, even with Rudolph, how well that connection looked and how great they played in that second half against Seattle. I'd imagine that carries over and maybe helps the tight end situation. That was also an issue going into the season. So Rudolph could fix a lot of this. Despite, I think it would have fixed with Ben naturally, but maybe Rudolph speeds it up because of the chemistry and because of knowing these guys, and maybe they need to step up more for Rudolph. So maybe that makes sense. What I do want to get you guys' thoughts on, though, and I haven't seen this brought up yet in the chat as I still go through things, we should get Dante Fowler in free agency next year because he probably won't resign. I hear you, but again, and I was shocked, and this actually will segue. I was shocked the Steelers brought in Steven Nelson as a free agent this past offseason. I was even further shocked they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick after week 2, trading a first-round pick. I opened the show, and I believe this. It makes sense, regardless of Ben being out, even with Mason Rudolph, regardless of who's the starting quarterback. It does make sense because you have years of control. He has a rookie deal. It's a position of need. You need that defense to be better, and they do believe in Rudolph. But I was shocked it happened because Kevin Colbert, this man here, calling Minkah Fitzpatrick an impact player. You can see that coverage and read that coverage on Pittsburgh Sports Live and SteelersNow.com. Not the most aggressive man in the world, okay? It's been years of success. I mean, the Steelers team, he's presided over championships, Super Bowl appearances, division titles, playoff appearances, AFC championship games, Hall of Fame players and coach. But they've struggled to draft the secondary, so maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick can serve as that guy next year. Maybe that bought into it. But they've also not been very aggressive in terms of they never sign anybody as a free agent. So this is before Minka. They bring in Florida to beg him to come back. It wasn't really aggressive in being proactive to make that move. Maybe why they only got a third and a fifth. But it still was a third and a fifth that led to them getting Devin Bush in the draft where he traded up to get Devin Bush. These are things that are uncharacteristic of Kevin Colbert. Kevin Colbert's a guy that didn't do these things prior, his first decade with the Steelers. There was no trading up. Or there was Polamalu and Santonio, so it happened. But that was 10 years ago still. It's been a while since he traded up to go grab a guy in the first round of the draft. To sign somebody as a free agent almost never occurs. I mean, I was always tell my friends over the years that you may want this guy, you may be playing fantasy football in the offseason. Steelers should go trade for this guy, should sign this guy. I get it. It's fun. But the Steelers never did any of it. I would always say you're wasting your time. It's just not going to happen. The Steelers don't sign free agents. They don't sign big-name free agents, if nothing else. I mean, there's the Arthur Moats of the world, but they don't bring in a Steven Nelson. They don't bring in impact players. They don't trade a first-round pick in the middle of the season, if nothing else. They don't do that. They leave the team alone that they enter the season with almost every year. No, first-round pick traded. Becomes their first-round pick next year, bringing in Minkah Fitzpatrick as an impact player right away to help this team now, despite an injury. Okay, they trade they trade Josh Dobbs, knowing after Mason Rudolph beat him out as the backup. Maybe regret that now because of the Ben injury, but they trade him in Jacksonville. They got a draft pick there. That's not as aggressive because it had to happen. It makes sense. It was easy, but still, that's a mid-season move, uncharacteristic of the Steelers. Kevin Cole, I don't know if it was from all the AB drama. I don't know if it's the fact that he's a grandfather now, and maybe he sees that Father Time, he's undefeated for players, but also undefeated for GMs. I don't know if he feels the heat or the pressure that's on Tomlin, was on Ben when he was healthy and the starter. He knows the contracts they re-upped with, but especially Tomlin doesn't get a 2-year extension, only a 1. Maybe he feels like he's attached to these guys, and realistically he is. The Rooneys aren't going to fire a head coach no matter what you want. Tomlin's going to have to walk away or just not get re-signed. They probably won't be firing a GM either, but maybe he's going to walk away or just not get re-signed because maybe he wants to be done with this project of the Steelers. Maybe him and his family. I know his daughter. I'm friends with her. I highly doubt they're going to want to be moving as they're entrenched here with her family, her kids, and his grandkids, even though they're not from here. But who knows what's going on, okay? It's speculation, but regardless, he's been more and more aggressive. You kind of like it if you're a fan or a media member. It's fun to cover. It's cool for you guys to be able to cheer for these star players coming in and out every week. There's tons of news. The Steelers are generating the headlines nationally. And it's not about Antonio Brown and allegations and doctors and missing games and where he wants to play and YouTube clips being recorded and phone conversations and voicemails. None of that. Instagram Live. That's not why they're making headlines. It's because of, yes, an injury, but also bringing in an impact player. So I don't know what it is, but I'd love to hear your opinions as we round this Steelers live chat out in terms of why Kevin Colbert's been so aggressive, the fact that he is more aggressive, and if you like him being more aggressive, and if you think that will last, and what moves they will maybe make in the future. Because as you bring things up, like Fowler, etc., normally I would say no, they're never going to do that. But the aggressive Kevin Colbert, you never know. In terms of re-signing players that are on this team, in terms of giving leashes to players, in terms of bringing in players outside the fold to help now. Because the Steelers clearly want to win now, even with Mason Rudolph as their starter. They clearly believe in Mason Rudolph in terms of that he can lead them to the playoffs and then can win. He can do a Nick Foles thing at the very least, where taking over for Carson Wentz, who was your clear guy, and leads you to a championship. Doesn't have to be Brady for Bledsoe in terms of Brady becoming the greatest of all time. For Bledsoe, who was a Pro Bowler and a borderline Hall of Famer in his own right, emphasizing borderline. But Ben's going to the Hall of Fame regardless. Steelers fans need to appreciate him, and many of you were way too damn excited for him to be hurt and wanted him benched just off a half of football before knowing the injury. That's all ridiculous, okay? He would have been more efficient this year regardless, and so will Rudolph, with AB being gone, and that offense will eventually click and figure things out. It always takes a year or two, or not a year or two, a week or two, for that Steelers offense to figure things out, whether Haley is there, whether Wisenhunt's there, no matter who's there. It always takes them a year or a week or two to figure things out. And then points get scored. There's still talent there. Figuring out the number 2 is key, but there's still talent there. Connor being healthy is key. Rudolph, 12 of 19, 200-plus yards. Played well in that second half. Again, that's all we have in terms of regular season tape. So that's why I had some concern. It wasn't exactly excited to lose Ben for a year in terms of the Steeler Nation, like many of you, ridiculously. But this team could still win games. I still think they're going to beat the Niners. And I know the Niners are 2-0, and the Steelers are 0-2. So record-wise, you wouldn't say that. But if we're doing a college football strength of schedule matters, then the Niners beat the Bengals and the Cardinals, and the Steelers lost to Russell Wilson, underrated as ever, Pro Bowler, 2-time NFC champion, 1-time Super Bowl champion, with Jadeveon Clowney added to that team. And Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, 6 rings, MVPs, numbers galore, adding Josh Gordon, even though AB didn't play in that game, but Josh Gordon was there, taking the lid off the defense. Belichick, the greatest coach of all time. Like it or not, those are facts. Greatest of all time for both two men. So you're facing two and this is what I said back, and you again can go through the channel, in terms of the first quarter of the season, the early Steelers preview, that's the show, I believe the title. The early season preview. It might be a roller coaster ride in terms of they may finish at 2-2. And I said it could be losing the first 2 and being 0-2 and then winning the next 2. The Bengals is a win. It has to be a win, regardless of whether Mason Rudolph, Ben Roethlisberger, myself is the quarterback, okay? The Bengals suck. They have some talent there, but you've already seen A.J. Green injury. Andy Dalton's way overrated, and it's clearly being evident now. They don't even have Vontaze Burfict to get in the headline news for controversy. It's a new era of Bengal football, finally, with Marvin Lewis now gone. But that team isn't that good. That's a home game. That's Monday Night Football. The Steelers are going to beat the Bengals. They even did when the Bengals were good. So that's a win. And the Niners, they're not a bad team with Garoppolo. Richard Sherman there. They're a better team than last year. They're healthier now, of course, with Garoppolo healthy. They're a better team than they were. It's not going to be a blowout. The Steelers aren't going to blow anybody out. But there's a reason why the Steelers are Vegas line favorites on the road in San Fran against the 2-0 team. And I didn't take that screenshot. I believe I forgot. But you can find that. Yeah, I did forget. Oh, well. You can still find that on SteelersNow.com because we have the whole Vegas line spread. We're going to be following that. And the reason why the Steelers opened as the favorite, despite that team being 2-0 and it being on the road, is because it's not like West to East where that team struggles usually, despite the Seahawks winning, and Tomlin now 6-1 against West Coast teams traveling east. But East to West doesn't matter. You pick up time. It's not a big deal. It's historically never been a problem. And the Steelers are 0-2, but they face 2 contending teams, whereas the Niners face 2 bad teams. The Cardinals are going nowhere. this year at least, with Kyler Murray. I feel bad for Larry Fitz, but they're not going anywhere this year. And the Bengals suck. So that's two teams they beat, but they didn't impress anybody. Okay. I'd imagine the Steelers should be favored in that game. And if the Steelers lose that game, yeah, that would be horrendous. And then they're 0-3 and the season probably is ruined. Granted, Rudolph can still play well and you're still going to try to make something of the season. But 0-3 is a hole to climb out of. But I think the Niners are an okay, favorable matchup, even on the road. That's a 2-0 team, but they beat Arizona and Cincy. I'm just not impressed. And they would not have beat the Seahawks, who we'll see in the regular season when they play them, or the Patriots, okay? It would probably be the same result where they're 0-2 if they played those two teams. So it's the whole UCF argument, and they're going to play Pitt this weekend, but a whole UCF argument in college football in the playoff. The reason why they don't make the playoff, the reason why they don't deserve to be in the top four, is because they do worry about strength of schedule in college football rankings. They do understand strength of schedule there and how good teams really are and what they really deserve. And the fact that they don't play top 25 teams anywhere near as often as opponents. They play in a weaker conference. So if Alabama has a cupcake game that is out of conference playing against a lower-level team, it's ridiculous. But at least they play LSU and Auburn and great teams throughout the regular season in the SEC. UCF's not doing that. They're playing Memphis. Pitt is their best game of the year, basically, and Pitt's an average team who just lost against the best team they've played so far in Penn State. So because they don't have a strength of schedule that matches up, people can realize and say, okay, objectively, if they would play an SEC schedule, if they would play a tougher schedule, if they played a Big 12 schedule or a Big 10 schedule, then they wouldn't have an undefeated season. Then they wouldn't be there. They'd have a worse record. So that's why they get ranked where they are, despite being good, and that's why they don't get in the playoff. That's the Niners right now. They're the UCF of the NFL. So I'm not yet buying the hype. 49ers got a good young defense. Yeah, they do. I mean, Sherman's a veteran, but they have a good young defense for sure. They're a better team. I want to make this clear. They're a good team. They're a better team. That young defense could give Mason Rudolph fits. If the Steelers don't figure out the running game with James Conner, if they don't get more consistency between him and Vance McDonald, which I expect to happen again, if they don't figure out the number 2 receiver, James Washington going to get his chances, especially now with Rudolph. But if that's not figured out and solidified, then and Juju doesn't play better, then yeah, that's going to be a problem against that Niners defense. That Niners defense is no slouch, and that Niners team is better than where they were last year and healthier. But they haven't impressed me yet, and there's no reason to say that off of what they did weeks 1 and 2, that all of a sudden they're going to dominate a team that has more talent than them despite the record. Okay? Wouldn't shock me. They could win, wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't be shocked about anything, really, in this day and age in sports, especially the NFL or the Steelers. But the Niners are a bit overrated based on who they played so far. And yeah, they have a good team. Yeah, they have a good young defense. But I'm just not buying the hype yet. And I think it makes sense the Steelers could be favorites going there. And they do desperately need the win, though, to avoid 0-3. We have more flexibility with Big Ben out. Again, Big Ben was never going to be benched when healthy. It just wasn't going to happen, even if some fans ridiculously wanted it. It was never going to happen, and I do feel like the offense would have clicked with him. He would have been more efficient this year than last, just naturally, as things get figured out, and they always take a slow process to figure out to open up the year. But I think there actually is more flexibility with him out. I kind of agree. In terms of the chemistry between Rudolph and James Washington, in terms of other guys needing to step up and knowing those roles even more, in terms of versatility and Vance McDonald being used more than Ben would have used him. So maybe that would help things, at least to speed it up quicker. 9-7, 9-6. I'm not sure if you're predicting records there. 9-7, obviously, unless we're going to factor a tie-in, would have to be the record to predict. 9-6-1 could be, but 9-7. That's not insane to say the Steelers would finish 9-7 this year, and that's win or lose at the Niners. I mean, they could win that game and still lose 7. They could lose that, or 5 more. They could lose that game, and that's already 3 losses, and they could end up winning everything but 4 more the rest of the year. The schedule actually gets easier as we go. They opened up with 2 contenders and Hall of Fame quarterbacks and Brady and Russell Wilson. So I kind of can buy that, 9-7. I don't think 9-7 wins the division like I thought entering the season. I don't think 9-7 wins you the AFC North. I don't think 9-7 gives you a proper seeding that positions you for a deep playoff run. But I do believe 9-7 gets you in the dance, gets you in the playoffs, gets you a wild card berth, And remember, going into the year, that would not have been great. But even so, this was a team that missed the playoffs a year ago that now has less talent than that team, even though other facets of the team have been improved, and I thought would still be a contender this year. But you do lose AB. You missed the playoffs with them last year. So if you finished as a playoff team, as a wild card team this year, even with Big Ben, yeah, that's disappointing because he's a Hall of Famer and you thought you'd be better to win a championship. But it's improved from last year, actually, technically. And especially without Big Ben, now you have a rookie quarterback. He's going to go through the maturation process. He's going to go through his growing pains. Nothing is guaranteed. He's good. There's confidence there. I believe in him. But you got to wait and see. So 9-7 wouldn't be insane. That wouldn't be that bad. Don't think you have to get Brady for Bledsoe. Be real, keep it real, be reasonable, and let him work in now his rookie season in terms of his actual play on the field. Half of football is all he has is regular season body work. So you got to give Rudolph some time. I wouldn't be shocked at 9-7. Based on what we're seeing, though, in terms of Cleveland and even Baltimore, and Cleveland already losing a game, I didn't buy their hype entering the year, despite Odell Beckham Jr. being there. But Baker Mayfield's a damn good quarterback. He's a stud. He's going to keep getting better as well. He's figuring things out. There's not a deep dip from week 1 to week 2 like many thought. He actually improved in week 2 after the slow hiccup. Maybe they needed that humble pie in week 1. They have a great defense in Jarvis Landry, etc. So that team's going to be better. They're going to be a contender this year. They're not going to go ahead and win a Super Bowl like some thought after they brought in Odell Beckham Jr., but they should be a wild card team, and at least close. They were last year. And the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, based on how he's playing, and he was my concern. I didn't think he would do this. He was missing those curl routes. He was missing the easy throws. I kept saying that to Ravens fans and Ravens media when they would put me on their shows. That was my worry, that he would do it again. But they have a great running game. They have a great defense with Earl Thomas there. Harbaugh is consistency. They're never going to be horrible with him as your coach. And they, right now, are the favorite to win the division, obviously, based on what they've done, who they played, what they've done it against. They haven't had a great schedule either in terms of they played an easy schedule like the Niners, but they're going to see the Chiefs this week, so we'll see. We'll now actually get to see what they do. But they're probably the favorite. So 9-7 wouldn't shock me, but that probably doesn't win the division, but should certainly get you a wild card. I'm going to round this out here. I don't want to have this linger over an hour or anything, even though I still got many of you watching and many of you in the live chat. So I do appreciate. We had our tech issues last week, or I would have done more of these. Had my grandmother pass away, had that whole funeral, whole thing there with family coming in and figuring things out. So there's reasons why I had shows recorded. I was able to upload shows. I'm certainly a part of the coverage at the stadium, have the credential doing it for SteelersNow.com this year, as well as what I guess a preview. And there's WVU beating NC State, but we'll see what that really means. I got a show that's going to talk about that. WVSportsNow.com, one of the newest members of the Pittsburgh Sports Now, the Now Network, under our umbrella. But I'm still, contribute over there, doing whatever else I do in media, doing my thing for different channels, and obviously rolling out shows here for Steelers Now. So despite what's going on in my life, still bringing you the content, but didn't have much time for these live chats, and here I am now. I got some time, so I wanted to do this, especially with everything going on. There was certainly easy to find something to talk about here and for you guys to get engaged. Okay, BK86. I will never call Bill Belichick a great coach. If you have to cheat to win, he never should deserve the praise as a great coach. I think I hear where you're coming from, because Deflategate and Spygate, there are, even if you don't believe Deflategate was him, there are factual things to show that he maybe bended rules way back. But I knew a guy, a former broadcast partner, that would always say for all those years, well, we know he was cheating, and that's why he won those first 3 Super Bowls, 3 out of 4 in the early 2000s, because of Spygate, and he never won without his assistant coaches, Romeo Crennel and Charlie Weiss. Well, then eventually, after those guys left, and Spygate was done, and everybody's probably doing the same thing. It's just keeping up with the Joneses and who gets caught. I can't say nobody else was taping anything. He was able to be a head coach of a team that went undefeated in the regular season and went to the Super Bowl, finished 18-1, and yes, they lost that Super Bowl to the Giants on a big upset, but that's probably the best team he ever coached in terms of talent, in terms of record, in terms of what they've done. We'll see if this team matches it, because that's been a conversation out there. He took another team to the Super Bowl a few years later and lost. But then it started coming together again, where you've seen recent years. The last 2 years they're in the Super Bowl. They win one, they lose one. They had those appearances against the Seahawks where they do beat Seattle despite the Marshawn Lynch run-in. 6 Super Bowl championships for Bill Belichick. He is a 6-time Super Bowl champion. That includes Spygate, Deflategate, whatever else gate. But he's been the best. And even with Deflategate, he had that one by 20-plus points, whether they play with a bar of soap or a football. So the body of work is there for him and Brady, and I'm not about to take it away from them no matter what, okay? Everybody's doing their own things, and he is a great coach. He is a Hall of Famer. He is the greatest coach of all time, and the body of work and resume is there. I just can't deny it, no matter what some may want to feel. Sorry. Rudolph reminds me of Tom Brady, no lie. Rudolph determination and looks forward to studying and getting better. That's Tom Brady right there. Well, BK again, I mean, I'm going to agree with you there, okay, in terms of, yes, he's looked good. Yes, he reminds me of Tom Brady in terms of he is confident, in terms of his poise, in terms of he's just on to Cincinnati or on to San Fran, in terms of his work ethic, in terms of him feeling like he's ready, in terms of what we're seeing, in terms of his poise in the pocket, in terms of his accuracy. All things that are Tom Brady-like, that are why he beat Dobbs out, that are, despite less experience, that are why he became the backup, that are why now he's a starter and many have confidence in him, still leading them to the playoffs, and why Minkah Fitzpatrick was still brought onto this team, even without Ben being there. However, that's, where it ends. I can't guarantee you this is going to be a Brady for Bledsoe scenario. Okay, I'm not saying that he's all of a sudden going to end up being a Pro Bowler of 3,000-plus passing yards, take him to winning a championship, do it again, after time, end up being a Hall of Famer. That's a bit rough. I mean, there's no way to say that right now. I think, again, that's what I was saying earlier, to keep it real, be realistic, be optimistic, but, be sane in terms of if he leads into the playoffs as a rookie, that's great. If he misses the playoffs, it's not Big Ben missing, it's Rudolph missing. He's a rookie in terms of what he played on the field. So it's hard to be too mad. And you can't expect anybody to beat Tom Brady for Bledsoe because Brady's the best ever, and Bledsoe was pretty damn good himself. And Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer taking over for Favre, and Steve Young became a Hall of Famer for Montana. Andrew Luck probably would have been that for Manning, but he ends up retiring before that Hall of Fame resume can get completed. And I did touch on that in a past show as well here on the channel. But I think any of those comparisons are a bit unfair right now. He does remind you of Brady in terms of his confidence, in terms of his skill level, in terms of how he's played a little bit, in terms of even how he carries himself. I hear it, I get you, but I don't want to throw up Brady comparisons too much because he's not even played a full damn game. He's not even started a game yet. Let's let him get out there. I'm going to probably close it with this one. Desmond Barnes, I prefer to look at the glass half full instead of half empty. I hear you. I mean, I don't necessarily think I'm overly negative either in my career. I'm just going to keep it real in what I think. I was a little optimistic coming into this year, and it's kind of got crapped on. So we'll see how it goes. It sucks that Ben got hurt, but on the other hand, you get a good chance of the young talent to build chemistry together going forward. So yeah, again, I think it's very reasonable to, even with Ben being out, you're going to be upset that Ben's out. It's very reasonable to say that Ben's a Hall of Famer. You got to appreciate what he's done for all those years. He wasn't that great last year despite all the yards and TDs. There was too many interceptions. He wasn't efficient enough. If he would have done that again this year, that would have been a problem. That would have hurt the team. He needed to be better, needed to be more efficient. I thought he would, but he wasn't in weeks 1 and 2. So that could give you some pause and concern. But you're still going to be upset when you lose your starter because it's a question mark with Rudolph. You at least know what you're going to get with Big Ben. Even if he gives you the Brett Favre style of just chucking the ball, you at least know that. With Mason Rudolph, who the hell knows? Maybe he can't even move you down the field. He did it in the preseason, but that was against preseason defenses, second-team defenses. We'll see if he does it in the regular season, despite looking good against Seattle in the second half. So I could see the concern when Ben went down. But I can also see in those same people, and I would never understand wanting Ben to get hurt or benching Ben when healthy for anybody else. He is still your guy and the starter, so when Ben is healthy, he's going to be the starter as of now. Obviously, that remains to be seen next year if he really does want to come back because if Rudolph plays really well this year, it's going to be hard to take the job from him, but that's a drama for another day. But Mason Rudolph, there's reason to have confidence. It's very reasonable and logical. There's reason to have confidence for Mason Rudolph. based on what we saw in training camp, preseason, and even against Seattle. There's reason to have confidence. Now, it's a little crazy and too much reasoning to go ahead and say he's going to be Tom Brady and do the Brady over, taking over for Bledsoe thing. But to have confidence and say he could be 9-7 and get a wild card berth, that's really damn reasonable. Yes. So, BK, even though we disagreed on some, we agreed on others. I appreciate it. You were probably the most active chatter in this live chat session, even though I got several of you who were active, and I know the people that were with me in past live chats. So, those guys, I didn't see you on this one, maybe because of the month off we took. I did shows, but not live chats. We'll hopefully get those guys back. But appreciate the compliment, BK86. I really enjoy your viewpoints. Keep up the great work. So appreciate it. Intelligent discussion. Able to agree, able to disagree. Never going to turn away a compliment in this sea of mostly criticism out there. People looking for what to criticize, people that put themselves out there, whether it be on social media or anywhere else. So you're providing some optimism and some confidence and some compliments, so thumbs up to you, and that's, yeah, I'm with you there. So that's your emoji. Either way. That's going to do it for this one. That's going to do it for this one in terms of this Steelers live chat. Now, I will do more of these, and I did try. It'll depend on, obviously, if things go awry again or what happens, but in my schedule, personal and career-wise. But I'm going to try to do a Steelers live chat at least once a week. Oh, you just discovered the channel, so that's why you weren't there before. All right, well, here's what I'm going to tell you, BK86. We appreciate the chatting. Click on the subscribe button. It's free. Click on the subscribe button. You'll get notifications when I do these shows, either when I upload content or when we do live chat shows. And it'll also not just be me. It'll be Penguins shows. It'll be Penguins content, getting to the preseason, interviews, as well as Tomlin, all the players, everything we're doing at the games, post-game coverage, Pitt, all the Pitt coverage. Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Steelers Now, even Pittsburgh Soccer Now and the others. WV Sports Now will have some stuff, even though they have their own channel, but because we don't filter it too much because this is Pittsburgh. But I'm going to have some West Virginia hot takes and shows too, so maybe even Pirates when they get back in season, even though they're mostly left alone right now. But it's all there. So click subscribe. Make it easier for us to get the content to you. You don't have to worry about me tweeting, or you can follow me at MikeAsti11, but also that gives you a notification right away. So we appreciate the new chatters and any of you guys who are back from before. Again, I'm going to hope to do at least one live chat every week based on all the news that's going on. A lot to talk about for you. I want you guys to get your thoughts out there and then upload one show of my own as well. And, of course, doing it big for what I'm going to do for all the sites, not just the Steelers, even though that's where I'm heavy at in terms of what I do here with the shows. But Pittsburgh Sports Live, it's all there, the channel that I run. And you're going to see more than just Steelers shows, but it's all there under the mic drop section of Pittsburgh Sports Live. So, again, follow me on Twitter at your own risk, at MikeAsti11. Make sure to click subscribe here on this channel. Enjoyed it. Glad to be doing it again in terms of the live chat. You'll see this show, as well as everything else we do that's Steelers-centric in terms of mic drop shows, on SteelersNow.com, as well as PGHSportsLive.com, where all of this content ends up living eventually, kind of archived there. Go to the Facebook, too, for Pittsburgh Sports Live, so you're going to see it there. Go ahead and like it there to get notifications there on Facebook, as well as Steelers Now on Facebook. And, of course, follow us on Twitter, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, and at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. Enjoy your shows. Here we go. There you go. So, appreciate it again. I get so much hate on Twitter, but I get compliments here. It's interesting. Appreciate that. That's an emoji. That's me being an emoji right there. It's my favorite. That and the eye roll. But again, find us there. Find us on those outlets: Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, SteelersNow.com, WVSportsNow.com, and talk to you guys next week. How about that? Talk to you guys next week on what I'm sure to be a wild ride and more of that roller coaster for the Steelers, as it's always a roller coaster for the Steelers, but especially this year so far. And win, lose, or draw against the Niners, and draws can happen nowadays, I'm sure there'll be a lot to discuss. So hope to talk to you guys next week.